on the top there that I'm experimenting with by a company called Suncoast out of Buffalo, New York. Again, the gentleman, Jim Sikora, he bought up all of the old Pierce parts when Pierce went out of business, and he's putting them into pedals, and it's got a great clean tone. Generally, I play with distortion, but you can edit that, right? I play with distortion, but sometimes put a clean tone in there also, and this particular pedal has a spectacular clean tone, and it's been working out very well for me. So that's a little bit about my gear. I think, again, I said rotosound strings and hipshot detuner and all that, but this would be the part where you ask me a question. Well, the question I get most often from bass players is three-finger technique about it. And it's pretty simple. Basically, I'm just playing in that order. When you're doing 4 with 3, 1 lands on a different finger each time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Slow down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So to keep it sounding like 4, you have to hit that accent. And then lately, I've just been skipping the whole thing and going to 4 fingers. Which makes even more sense somehow. And since I've been off the road a little bit this year, I've worked very hard on finding some new ideas on bass as far as what I'm playing. And a couple of the things that I'm working on, which I haven't got completed yet, is just a lot of... kind of a fifths. I used to, when I was a kid back in Buffalo, New York, be in my apartment and people come over, knock on the door, and I'd have my bass on, and they'd say, "Don't you ever put that thing down?" And I'd say, "Well, as a matter of fact, I don't." So I practice a lot then, but I'm practicing even more now. And at my particular age, usually you start to slack off and relax on it a bit and let it go, but actually the opposite is happening to me. I don't know exactly why. I'm just pushing it harder than I've ever have, and it's an incredible joy to do so. I go around the world and do clinics like this, often with an interpreter, translator, in places where English is not the native language. And it's quite fascinating to see people get more and more and more involved in music. And as they go on and move forward and expand as an artist, it's a wonderful thing to do. So I do enjoy doing the clinics for that reason, among many. And what else can we talk about? Somebody yell something out. What's that? Very good question. He asked who inspired me. Now I'll launch off on the thing. It's also needs a little seed to plant there, and I'll go with it. Paul Samuel Smith from the Yardbirds. Paul Samuel Smith played in a band called the Yardbirds. They're most famous for their 3 guitarists, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck. Whoever they were, I don't know. But he was an amazing player, and having a rave up with the Yardbirds was one of the first records I ever really got into. That came from actually the Over Under Sideways Down record. That was a song called Lost Woman. But I remember he's the reason also why I put that pickup in my bass, because he had a super deep low end. Smiling like you do know what the Yardbirds are about. I'm glad somebody here does this. Right on. But Paul Samuel Smith was a huge influence on me early days, and the band itself too was awesome. And that's why I got so heavily into Jeff Beck in the early days as well. Later after that, Tim Bogert from the Vanilla Fudge, who was just a spectacular player, kind of all over the neck, but it's so brilliantly done. It's just musical and orchestral and fantastic. And I had the great honor of finally meeting Tim and getting to become friends with him. And he basically told me he was just imitating Jamie Jamerson, only in a psychedelic version. And in a way, he's kind of right, because Jamie Jamerson on the a lot of the Motown stuff, he was all over the place. The drums were pretty straight. If there was a guitar, it was pretty minimal. But the bass was moving all over the place as the main melody. I think that's Paul McCartney may have been influenced by that a little bit as well, because bass in a lot of those early songs is the most active instrument. Matter of fact, in bands in the old days, when I first started, having a B3 was more important than having a guitar in the band, because the songs, the copy songs you were doing, it was much more important to have that B3 tone. So those are the two first guys, and then just about everybody since them. And not only bass players, a lot of guitar players, a lot of sax players, a lot of piano players, all the octave. I saw piano players play an octave. I thought there's got to be a way. Aha, there it is. So stolen piano technique. That's okay. And I listened to a lot of sax players, a lot of B3 players. I was in a band with a blind B3 player when I was very young, a guy by the name of Ray Schmaltz, an amazing, incredible B3 player, blind since birth. And so he had an extra sense of music and tonality that is not uncommon with people that lose a sense. The other senses make up for it. And so I learned about Jimmy Smith and all these great jazz players. And Vanilla Fudge also, that Tim Bogert came from, that was a heavy B3 band as well. And then, but my real reason for getting involved in playing music was when I saw the Ed Sullivan Show and I saw the Beatles. And that launched about 10 million careers, I think. I know very few guys from my generation that did not start when they saw that TV show. And they saw all the girls screaming for the guys on stage, and everybody said, I want that job. And that's exactly what we did. So my iTunes is quite extensive, and I collect, one of my specialties is garage rock from the 60s from all over the world. And it's amazing the amount of people that got into the Beatles that we didn't even know about. Of course, in America, Canada, and Britain, and Australia, English-speaking countries, but all the other countries did too. So I've got Beatle copy bands from Ecuador and the Philippines and Thailand and every place you could possibly imagine. Quite sweet and endearing what they did with the songs. There are translations of them. Of course there were a lot of mistakes, but it was a beautiful thing to see that much change happen in the world from one little band coming out of Liverpool, England. They touched everybody. And there are tens of thousands of tracks and bands in that collection that I have in my iTunes. Pretty amazing. So, but I'm still getting influenced too. I listen a lot to classical music. Of course, Bach and Beethoven were my first, as most people, the most popular Mozart, Bach, Beethoven. But later on, I began to get into Debussy.